Hey guys, what's up? Jared here, Dex and Dice, Ramblings of an LGS owner, and I need to do a follow-up part two or whatever to my yesterday's video with Commander League, my experiment, stuff like that, because I don't think I actually got my point across. And yeah, I'm in the basement today because it's Saturday, technically my day off, at least from the shop. So here we go. The point that I was kind of wanting to get around to was like at what point does the reward, your participation trophy, whatever, actually become like why you decide to actually even participate to begin with? Because as you know, yesterday I made the video about my Commander League experience. Me stopping Commander League, stop doing the raffle, um, the extra prizing, stuff like that. My fingers are cracking, and it made it to be, where, surprise, people stopped showing up as much as they did. And it was like a drastic drop. Granted, yes, okay, it's summertime, Clemson is out, people are on vacation, all that good stuff. So probably a not ideal time to institute something like that, but like, I did it back in May, and here I am in July reporting my findings, right? Um, but one comment kind of changed my direction of thinking. Like, I didn't quite get across my point, and then I realized like maybe I was trying to articulate the wrong question or point to the question or whatever, like, because the question wasn't, are commander players entitled, or are TCG players in general entitled. The actual question I was trying to get across was, again, like, at what point does the reward stop being a bonus and start becoming like the expected price of participating in anything, be it like, locals, a regional, or whatever. That's kind of what I was getting at or hoping to get at, but I think I probably failed because, squirrel brain and rambling. So I kind of jotted down a loose little script here to try to follow, so that way my brain doesn't just trail off, but we'll see what happens. And yeah, this is how you know I'm actually Southern. Sweet tea out of an old repurposed salsa jar. So you're welcome. So, again, just another quick recap in case you missed it or just need it or whatever. I stopped doing Commander League back in May. Removed the raffle, prizing, side quests, everything for it. After a few weeks, the attendance just straight dick in the dirt. And then, I noticed the Friday sales dropped, obviously, because attendance stopped. It was only about maybe $500 to $1,000, but you compound that over 4 Fridays in a month and you kind of notice it. And again, yes, summer probably affected that. Clemson being out probably affected that. I'm saying that, did my little experiment prove some kind of like undeniable universal truth? No. Not saying that that's going to be the case, right? But it made me ask the bigger question. And the bigger question is, going back to it, with the whole like, does the prizing end up being like the reward for participation or whatever it was? Are they only showing up on these things strictly for the prizing? But anywho, here we go. Like, I think it's also important to put into where I'm coming from on this, because a lot of you are new and I've gone over this in older videos. But before I go any further, let me tell you that, I started playing Magic back in 94, might have been like late 93, 94, or somewhere around there. I stopped actually like playing religiously and everything in 98, 99, because my entire collection got stolen, and we're talking, probably 20, 30, 40, 50,000 cards just poof, gone. And in that time, trading card games were still in their infancy. Organized play was still kind of like figuring itself out. Local game stores were still figuring out local play to begin with. You know, Everyone was in that little area was just kind of figuring it the hell out as you went along, because back I played, when I played and where I played, I guess, you paid your entry fee, you played, if you hit the top four, maybe top six, depending on how big it was, right? Congrats, you won something for being good. If you didn't rank in that little echelon of stuff, better luck next week. You didn't get any kind of participation trophies, none of that stuff. Your $5 entry or whatever, your pack went to the prize pool in hopes of you winning back your pack plus more, right? You Nobody expected something simply because they attended. Now, because before someone jumps on me in the comments or whatever, I also recognize that I missed, like, just barely missed when Wizards actually started giving out, like, F&M promos and buy a box promos and all that good stuff. I quit before they started doing that. So it's entirely possible that I have, not that I have, but it's entirely possible that I missed this whole transition of participation packs, trophies, whatever, prizing, etc., weighing in as much as it does now. Okay? Because my memories don't represent the entire thing of Magic, right? Or history of Magic, or anyone else's experience with Magic, nothing like that. It's simply the lens that I'm looking through, you know, and while my perspective on that, yes, it changed and stopped at around 99, my game store owner perspective or whatever has kicked in. I am now on the other side of it. I've owned my own shop for 5 years. I worked at another LGS for roughly a year before that, and then, doing the basement cellar stuff during COVID and all that. So I get to see this hobby from a completely different angle now, and it's it's eye-opening, to say the least. So the more I've thought about it, maybe it's like I said before, it's not just about Commander. It's kind of like TCGs in general. I think it's more on the like incentive discussion that a lot of these TCGs now offer, or a lot of LGSs have to offer as well, on top of the normal TCG incentives that they give to come play, right? Because incentives aren't bad, right? Every business uses them. You get your coupons, loyalty codes, whatever it may be, buy one, get ones, blah, blah, blah. Incentives are there for a reason. They work arguably pretty good. The question isn't whether the incentives are good, it's what happens after 20 or 30 years of these incentives just being there, becoming commonplace, and just being accepted as is, a thing that just merely is. You turn on the tap at your house, you expect the water to come out, right? So I'm curious about the incentives and the financial aspect of stuff, of where, like, well, people are like, well, what's the pricing like, what's the participation packs, what are those things worth on top of the already, like, general pricing that I'm going to get from the LGS, extra packs or something like that, you know and I want to make clear that even during my time, TCGs, all like four of them that there were, um, there's always been that financial investment kind of like aspect. Um, we didn't have updating charts like we have now with the internet and TCG Player. We had InQuest and Scry magazine that you would get once a month, and that's how you knew what something was worth, or how you could gauge what a card was worth, right? People cared about values. You still had, sharks out there looking to screw somebody over to get the best deal possible or whatever. Like none of this is intrinsically new to the hobby. But like what I think actually changed is not how we evaluate the cards, how we give them monetary value or whatever, because if you have something right now that you can pull out of your pocket and look at and boom, it tells you how much the card is supposed to be, right? I think it ultimately goes down to how we have evaluated the experience of attending a locals or a regional or whatever it may be, just attending an event in general, right? Because it seems like we have become evaluating these events as like investments, right? You always hear about like what's the entry fee, what's the prize support, who's going, how many players are there, what's actually for first place, what's top 4, top 8, which I guess would go back into like your prize support and all that good stuff. And I'm not saying that like everybody is focused on those questions. I'm not saying everyone is laser focused on just the incentives and the prize support and all that good stuff, but if you've worked in an LGS or you own an LGS, you know what I'm talking about. You've heard those conversations a lot. And it kind of got me more to thinking like, when did the transition go from, oh, do I go hang out at the shop tonight and do I go play? Like, do I test this new deck? I made this janky little deck. It seems really fun. Do I go out and give it a shot? To like asking if tonight is worth it. And by worth it, I mean financially. Whether people want to agree with that or admit to it or not, that's kind of what it boils down to, I guess, more or less. And like, those questions obviously are not the same question, from do I want to play tonight and just have fun to is it worth me going out to play. um and then I kind of started like asking myself about the incentives that help butter that little thing with do I go out and play, right? Is it worth it for me to go out and play? And then I started thinking like, that video maybe made it seem like I was trying to point the finger at the players, and I wasn't trying to point the finger at the players. Whatever card game you might be playing, I'm not pointing the finger at you, because it's not the players' fault. The publishers of the games create the OTS packs, the prizing and all that good stuff, the winner packs, judge packs, etc. Us as LGSs, we expand upon those incentives, extra booster packs or some, I don't know, promos from a year or so ago that we never got around to handing out, something extra to grease the wheel, store credit or something. And then once we expand on those incentives, players just, they're human. They do what humans do. They adapt. And then we adapt, and these incentives and everything extra on top, they're no longer incentives anymore. They become like the normal baseline, right? And then you have to kind of add a little bit extra, or some people do, generally speaking here. Stores start adding a little bit extra. Players adapt again. Store owners and stuff, we respond again. The weird little cycle repeats, and it's not because players are evil or the stores are evil or the players are greedy or the stores are greedy or anything like that. And it's not because stores are trying to manipulate people to, do X, Y, and Z or whatever. It's just human nature. We respond to incentives, and I understand that. A lot of people in general have the, well, why would I do this if X doesn't happen? Even if it's like a good deed, you still do the good deed because it's the right thing to do, but you also get a little hit of dopamine or whatever it might be for doing said good deed. So there's always like an incentive, right? And then my little experiment, little silent experiment, whatever it is, kind of got me to thinking, you know, I don't really run just Magic, like I said in the other videos. There's Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, One Piece, Digimon, Gundam. We're gonna do, Cyberpunk, and might dabble with Pal World a little bit just for shits and giggles. But anyways, every one of those games offers or will offer like a meaningful publisher supported organized play stuff, right? OTS, I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh has OTS. Bandai hands out their actual tournament packs and like the winner packs and judge packs and stuff. Yu-Gi-Oh is going to have like winner packs and judge packs. And like Magic, WotC, whoever, they do too, but they don't hand out as much as the other ones do, because on a long enough timeline with doing that, you generally run out of Magic incentives, to keep giving people, and then the shop has to start shouldering more of the incentives to keep the players there, because once you run out of promo packs or random cards or whatever to give out, you're done until they decide to send another wave a month or two down the road, whatever it might be. So you're stuck filling the gap. And from from like my experience, like I said, I got like 60 promo packs from WotC, and in retrospect, I'll be more generous and I'll say that I got 100 or 120 packs. We'll double it. I got 120 packs of promo packs from WotC. Still at just my normal 20 to 30, commander players or whatever. That's what, 6 Fridays worth of participation packs. That's just saying that I just hand out one to everyone and not be super stingy about it and just say, no, you only get one if you win or whatever. So still would not have been enough if that original number was doubled. So that's kind of why I started the raffle that I instituted, which again, my raffle was, for every $10 you get a ticket, and then whatever's up there you put the ticket towards it, just like a normal raffle would work. And I would raffle off commander decks, deck boxes, sleeves. It would really just depend on what I had and what I felt like putting up there. So at that point, I was like, well, now here we go. I'm shouldering most of the prize support afterwards, and I wanted to see with my experiment, if I were to cut that off, what happened. And lo and behold, I guess the obvious happened. But like, one of the hardest realizations in this whole experiment was, it wasn't about my customers or my commander players or anything like that. It was about me, because it's really easy to point at players, it's really easy to point at Wizards or any other organized player organization, but like at the end of the day, I'm part of the system itself too, the whole ecosystem that there is. I'm the one who decided to supply the raffle prizes. I'm the one that created the league points. I'm the one who kept adding the incentives to keep coming to the shop on Fridays and playing, right? So it's on me for that. And like I said, that goes back to the whole stores keep adding incentives and all that good stuff, because people get used to it, and then it just becomes the norm of, oh, well, this thing that is actually an extra isn't an extra anymore because it's been happening for so long now. It's a norm, and I just expect this to be a thing. What else is there? Because that's no longer enough to incentivize me or us or whatever to come out and play anymore. And, like I said, I admit I 100% helped with the whole incentivizing please come play here thing, right? That is something that I did and tons of other stores do as well. But we're all trying to accomplish the exact same thing with that, just to get another person into the door for the chance of them becoming a regular to spend money, become part of the community, and all that good stuff, right? The intentions of that don't always determine the outcomes, because the outcome wasn't or isn't supposed to be something to where you stop supplying so much free shit or whatever and the people just dry up and stop coming or whatever. And again, reiterate, timing was probably bad. Summer, Clemson's out, vacations, all that good stuff, right? So, but still, I just want to say that that's probably a determining factor too. But like, where exactly does that leave us? In this whole thing, where does it leave us? I don't believe that, TCG players, just like I said in the other video, automatically woke up one day and was like, I want to be an entitled bastard. You know, don't think that happened overnight. I don't think publishers meant for it to be something that would cultivate like an unhealthy expectations. I don't think the stores having to kind of pad the incentives, pad the pricing and all that good stuff. I don't think that was something that was meant to bring out unhealthy expectations or whatever. I don't think, I don't think we knowingly train the customers to expect something every week and then after a certain amount of weeks a little more and then a little more and a little more, right? I think we all just kind of simply adapted to each other over time, be that through feedback, because publishers ask you to take surveys and all that good stuff. I don't know if some of the feedback from shops was like, oh, we found out that if we added an extra pack or two it brought in XYZ, or it helped retention, blah blah blah, stuff like that. I think that after so long of sharing and all that good stuff, it all just kind of ended up being what we have now. The just straight out incentive structure of if the incentives aren't worth it, I'm no longer going, because it's no longer just I'm gonna go play and have fun. I'm gonna go test out this deck or whatever. Cool, great. Here's my $10. Cool, I might win something. That's not necessarily a thing anymore. Whether anyone wants to admit it or not, it's all financially driven to be, is it worth my participation? And again, like, I'm trying to figure out like what point does the reward stop being a bonus and start becoming the expected price in the participation. Like where did that start? When did that happen? Why did that happen? But I guess the why might be because we all just adapted to what we have, what we kept piling on to each other and everything. But you know it is what it is. I might be wrong in my whole assumption, which is perfectly feasible. Wouldn't be the first time, won't be the last. You know, uh, maybe it was just the summer that that affected my experiment the way that it did. With Clemson being out and all that good stuff. But maybe this says more about my store than it does the hobby. I don't know. But I think it's worth just asking the question whether we've slowly trained ourselves to evaluate events less by the actual experience, like having fun, making memories if you want to do it like that or whatever, and we started evaluating it more based on the expected return of like, what do I get? Not because it was something that intended to happen that way or whatever, but because it's just been decades of incentives piling on top of incentives on top of incentives, because you always kind of gotta one up yourself to make things more interesting, right? And I think that's just where it naturally led us. And if nothing else, like at the end of the day, if nothing else, if none of this is right or whatever, it's just all my store for some reason because it was bad timing or whatever. I do believe, because like I said, I worked in an LGS before this and I have seen this at that place too. And from talking to other owners, other people who go to other LGSs, I know that this is commonplace. It's just not something that we all like to shine light on, but I think it's legitimately a conversation worth having, you know. Not like a did we spoil everybody to be entitled brats or whatever, but like why did we start doing that? What just why? What good was it going to be on the forever timeline to just do that? To make it be not about the experience anymore, but about what you can win and take away from the experience, even if it's just like a locals or something. Like, when did that compound to, is it worth it for me to be there? Now, I understand everyone's like, my time is precious, it's expensive, and all that. I get it, but this is a hobby mostly. It's what you do with your expendable time. So, like, while it's cool to try to monetize your time and all that good stuff, it's not supposed to necessarily be that way. But anywho, I guess that's about all I got, man. You know, I hope that maybe cleared up the other video. I'm sure it sparked a whole bunch of other questions and whatever, so please, by all means, let me know in the comments. Um, I I think maybe I did get my point by a little bit better, but yeah, it's a weird thing to see from, like I said, my old archaic ass and what I was used to doing and experiencing versus what you have now, to where it's kind of like, you know, and like I said, I kind of understand where it's like, well, if I don't have to get my ass off the couch and leave my house to go play something or whatever, if they're not giving me $30 worth of free shit for my $10 entry, why should I even go? I get that, but that's not a healthy way to look at stuff. And like I said, I think publishers and LGSs and stuff are partly to blame for just continuing to add just a little bit more, each and every month or week or whatever it was. And now we're just in a kind of weird spot to where if you aren't incentivizing enough, you don't get anything, because it's not anything for I just enjoy X, Y, and Z anymore, or it doesn't really appear that way. From what I've seen and been able to take away is even people who say that don't mean it necessarily. And I think I'm not alone when I say this too, if you've gotten this far into the video, to where depending on what game it is and all that good stuff for your locals that you might hold, if for some reason the actual prize chase card in a case was pulled in some of the locals prizing, you'll have people that simply stop showing up or stop participating in that locals. They'll still come and play, free play during that time and all that good stuff, but they won't actually play in the locals. They won't pay the $5 or $10 to join the locals, because the hit card has been pulled from the case, and that completely eliminates them from either being able to flip it, use it as trade bait, add it to the binder for the collection to sell later. There's no way for them to roll the dice and magically be able to profit off of the locals anymore, so they stop. You know, we've all heard that, we've all seen that. Again, whether anyone wants to actually talk about it or not and put some light on it, here we are, I'm bringing it up. It's just another example of how the incentive thing has kind of gotten out of control, but there's not a whole lot you can do about it now. But, anyways, I'm done, guys. Have a good one. I'll talk at you later. And remember, life is not a dick. You don't have to take it so hard. You're a trash can, not a trash can't. Use PCG to grade your stuff. Please, dear Lord, use PCG to grade your stuff. Link in the comments below. D&D 10 to save you some money on your submissions. Give them a shot. You will not be let down. Trust me on that one. Have a good one, guys.